what role can the city play in supporting high quality care and education, and collaborating with agencies like OUSD, like Head Start, like the number of children who currently aren't served because there just aren't slots for them, and their families can't afford to pay for private care.
And when we talk about the interactions between the City of Oakland and OUSD, I think it's important that I put out my frame, which is that I understand that Oakland Unified School District is a separate agency, and I will not attempt to take it over, nor will I attempt to put it into receivership. But I also understand that there has to be much closer and stronger relationships, that the city and the school district have to be partners, not where one tries to stomp on the other or run the other, but where we see each other as in a mutual collaboration, because our city cannot succeed if our children are not succeeding and if we're not providing the resources our children need. And so that's how I approach this in terms of the big picture. Now let's go specifically to our youngest children, because it is essential. How we handle the beginning is incredibly determinative of what happens after that, as you've pointed out. And I would even say, I would even take it one step earlier, because premature births and poor birth outcome can also really set the stage for what comes. So in terms of the types of programs and priorities that I will set, they include both 0 to 3, but also before that, making sure that we have access to healthy programs for pregnant mothers, and making sure that we have the access to nutrition, the access to healthy food, that we are reducing the kind of toxic emissions and other hazards that cause premature birth, because that can also set our children up for long-term problems. So I would include that in my view as well. And now let's talk about early childhood education and child care for young kids, because this is a huge issue. One of the goals that I have for Oakland is to fundamentally revitalize our economy in a strategy based on sustainable development by harnessing federal funds that are being made available for transit-oriented development. Now, usually when people hear that, they don't think child care, but that means the federal government is giving out money to build new projects adjacent to transit hubs, and it is my commitment that those projects should include child care centers, and that then those funds, which may not be called child care funds, they may be called transit village funds, but we can leverage those funds to create child care centers at locations that are easily accessible to working families, and use the fact that we have some of those outside funds to support them as part of how we then make the care affordable, because the center is being supported by outside grant dollars. So that's one new piece that I want to bring to the table that I think hasn't been as big a part of our community conversation. Now, in addition to that, we need to make sure that our youngest kids have access to programs that are truly enriching and supportive. So they need not just physically just a place to be, but also a place to be that has, you know, things that are both fun and enriching and uplifting. And, you know, that includes arts, that includes nutrition. I think we need to weave food and food knowledge more thoroughly into our programming, and that is both good for health, and it also, for many kids, is very engaging to talk about and work with the food. So I would work to incorporate that as well. And the other thing I want to say is that, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger is crazy, and his priorities are completely wrong and backwards. And our state of California used to be renowned nationwide and worldwide for the quality of our education. And over the past decade, it has shifted to the point that now California spends more on prisons than on schools. And we have to stop that. That's part of why they keep saying, oh, we don't have enough money to fund these programs. But they keep seeming to have enough money when what they want to spend it on is more incarceration. So that too needs to be part of our continued effort.
So how do you see the mayor's office really being able to both leverage relationships and also be able to really promote an agenda that speaks to what you were just talking about quality, about access for both working families and for low-income families?
Well, the mayor's office has the responsibility both in terms of setting the tone and in terms of specific projects. So as mayor, I would include early childhood education programming in our grant applications, in our federal and state advocacy. The mayor's office takes a leadership role in terms of lobbying in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., in terms of issues like planning for projects so that we incorporate child care centers into projects that we're planning. So those are some of the direct advocacy. But then we also have a role in terms of community support, maintaining coalition building efforts. So for example, there's currently a city school collaborative around the 81st Avenue Library. I think that is a great role model because as we are dealing with scarce resources, we need to do an ever better effort at the ways in which we share. And of course, we teach our children about the importance of sharing, but we as the adults and the civic leaders have to role model that and embody that. And so I would see my role also in terms of strengthening ties around the school yards and combining Parks and Rec funding with school funding so that we can create school yards as available recreation centers with the school already owns the yard, and you combine that with Parks and Rec funding and other sources so that you have both the location and the funding for the personnel to run the program, and to continue to tap those types of collaboratives so that the money from one pot and the money from the other pot combine to fund a truly viable program.
How do you think that we can, as a city, also support families through providing care so that they can go back to work? If they don't have childcare, they can't go to work. But also with the supports that come with really building a community around our children.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that question about building a community around our children, because I think too often the questions about how our children are struggling are talked about as if they're separate from what's going on for parents. And the reality is that it is the economic struggles of the parents and related struggles that are fundamentally the core problem in so many of these situations. That means that I am committed to fighting for living wage jobs for residents in our community. When the parents don't have living wage jobs, then often it means taking on a second job, taking on extra shifts, not having the time to be with their children. And so the ongoing effort and my commitment to strong local hiring policies with living wages, that is not separate from what happens for the kids, because when the parents don't have the resources, they're then not available to the kids. It also means making the resources available, making sure that we are providing the adult education, the continuing literacy programs for the adults so that they are also supported in those efforts, as well as actually directly providing the books. I want to strengthen the programs where we're providing both the education about how and why this matters, but also actually giving out books, right, so that people have that. And,
Sorry,
honoring,
okay, to that, I think
yes.
too,
That's
the Oakland Public Library really needs to be, I think, a strong partner, and they've really suffered in the last couple of years.
Oh, very much so. For example, right now, the Oakland libraries are closed during winter break. I want to stop that immediately. The notion that the very time that the kids are out of school and would use the library and need a place to be, and for that period the libraries are shut down. So that's something I want to change right away, as well as the ongoing long-term effort to put our libraries on better financial footing. But we have to understand also that a lot of parents are not able to provide that level of support to their kids, not because they're bad and not that we should talk down to them, but because the parents aren't being given the level of support that they need. And so that is something we need to really keep in mind, and not to demonize people but to understand that we have to provide the living wage jobs so that people don't have to work 3 jobs, that we have to provide quality libraries that are open so that the parents have that as a resource. And as I mentioned, also actually give out books so that people have that to take home and can incorporate that into their efforts. And then I'd also like to expand programming that covers multiple goals simultaneously. So I have a friend who's a teacher at Disable High School in Chicago, and he created an after-school program that combines math and reading education with cooking, where both students and parents can come in and they actually engage in cooking. There's actually using the commercial kitchen, and while cooking, they're learning measuring, fractions, math, and reading, and then at the end, they eat. And I'd like to have more programs like that as well.